It's a wild thought, isn't it? You know, a dinosaur found in Maryland ends up as the state dinosaur of Texas
Yeah,
before Maryland even claimed it. That's quite the journey.
it really is. And it kind of tells you something, doesn't it, about how these discoveries unfold, how our understanding changes over time.
Exactly. And that's really what we're diving into today. We're going deep on Astrodon,
Mm-hmm.
this massive plant-eating dinosaur, early Cretaceous period.
Right. And we'll be looking at, the initial finds, how it was classified, just how big it was.
All that stuff.
Yeah. And the debates, too, because there are debates. Plus, what his world was actually like back then.
Okay, so our mission for you listening is to pull out the really interesting, solid info about Astrodon, give you a good picture of this giant, the science behind it, but keep it clear, not get lost in the weeds.
That's good.
All right, let's do it. Where does the Astrodon story kick off?
Okay, so picture this. Late November 1858, a guy named John D. Latchford is digging in his iron ore pit. This is in Maryland, Arundel Formation, near Muirkirk. Okay. And he finds these two fossil teeth, not just rocks, actual teeth, the first real clues.
And these teeth, they end up with a chemist first, Philip Thomas Tyson.
That's right. And Tyson passes them along to Professor Christopher Johnston, who was, interestingly enough, a dentist.
A dentist. Looking at dinosaur teeth, that really says something about how early paleontology worked, doesn't it? Kind of cross-disciplinary.
It really does. And Johnston, he was thorough. He actually sliced one tooth open, looked inside.
What did he say?
He saw this very clear star-shaped pattern in the cross-section.
Yeah.
Really unique. And that's what led him to coin the genus name Astrodon in 1859.
Astrodon. Startooth. Okay, makes sense.
Literally, yeah. Star tooth.
But there's a little twist here, right? He named the genus Astrodon, but not the species.
Exactly. He didn't assign a specific species name. That came a bit later. 1865, actually. Joseph Leidy stepped in.
Ah, lady. A big name.
A very big name. He officially named the species Astrodon johnstoni, and he designated one specific tooth, YPM 798, as the holotype. That's the main reference specimen.
So Johnston gave us the star tooth concept. Leidy formalized it as Astrodon johnstoni.
Pretty much, yeah.
And here's a cool what if. If Johnston had given it a species name back in '59, Astrodon could have been only the second dinosaur species named in the U.S. Just missed it.
Wow, yeah. Close call in the history books. And there's another small detail. Johnston later misremembered where the teeth were found. Said near Bladensburg, not Muirkirk.
Shows how memory can play tricks, even with big discoveries. Keep good notes.
Always good advice in science.
Okay, so we've got the discovery, the star teeth, the name. But the Astrodon story gets, well, complicated after that, doesn't it? This whole thing with another dinosaur, Puricalilus.
Yes, here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward to 1888. The famous paleontologist O.C. Marsh.
Marsh, okay. Another giant figure.
Right. He described some bones, also from the Arundel Formation, pretty close to where the Astrodon teeth turned up. And he called these Pluricalus nanus and Pluricalus altus.
Okay, so suddenly we have more potential sauropods from the same area. How did they get linked to Astrodon?
That connection really comes from John Bell Hatcher. In 1903, he looked closely. He noticed that the teeth found with the Pluricalus nanus bones looked, well, a lot like the Astrodon johnstoni's teeth.
With similar teeth. Okay.
Yeah. So Hatcher argued quite strongly that they were probably the same animal. And if that's true, the name Astrodon came first.
Right, the priority rule. The earliest valid name wins.
Yeah.
So did everyone just agree then? Puricalus is Astrodon?
Well, not quite that simple. In 1921, Charles Gilmore looked at it. He mostly agreed Pluricalus as a genus was probably a junior synonym of Astrodon.
Meaning Astrodon was the correct genus name.
Right. But Gilmore, initially at least, kept P. nanus and P. altus as separate species, just moved them into the Astrodon genus. So you had Astrodon nanus and Astrodon altus for a while.
Okay, so a bit of shuffling around. It sounds like they were wrestling with, how much variation is okay within one species versus needing separate ones. Science in progress.
Absolutely. It's always refining.
Yeah.
Then, much later, 2005, Kenneth Carpenter and Virginia Tidwell took another look, a really thorough one.
And what did they conclude?
They basically came back to Hatcher's original idea. They argued pretty convincingly that Pluricalus nanus and Pluricalus saltus weren't separate species at all, but likely just different growth stages.
Ah, like a juvenile and maybe a subadult of Astrodon johnstoni.
Exactly. That's a huge challenge in paleontology, right? Figuring out if you have two different things or just, a baby and a teenager are the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Like finding a tadpole and a frog and not knowing they're related at first.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
But the story still wasn't completely settled. Other paleontologists were entirely convinced. Peter Rose in 2007, Michael Dimick in 2013, they raised some doubts.
Doubts about what specifically? Why weren't they sold on the idea that Pleurocoelus was just young Astrodon?
Their main point was about the teeth themselves and the other bones. They argued that maybe those original Astrodon teeth and the Pleurocoelus material, maybe they weren't unique enough.
Not distinctive enough to be sure.
Right. Maybe they lacked clear diagnostic features to confidently say, this is Astrodon and nothing else, or this Pleurocoelus material definitely belongs to Astrodon. Rose suggested the defining fossils for both might lack those key features needed for a solid comparison.
So the very evidence the names were based on might be ambiguous, like trying to ID someone from a blurry photo.
Kinda, yeah. Dimick took it further. He suggested Astrodon johnstonii and the two Pleurocoelus species might even be nomina dubia.
Dubious names, meaning
The original fossils they're based on are just too fragmentary or non-distinctive to reliably define a species. He also questioned the Pleurocoelus nanus bones, were they even from one individual? Or maybe a mix of different animals?
Wow, okay. That throws a wrench in things. It really shows how tough it is working with scraps from millions of years ago. Lots of interpretation needed.
Definitely. And Dimick also criticized the broader diagnosis Carpenter and Tidwell used, the one based on lots of different bones from the Arundel Formation, not just the teeth.
What was his issue there?
He argued that many features they called unique to Astrodon could actually be found in other sauropods, like Camarasaurus, or it might just be features you see in young dinosaurs generally.
So the debate really boils down to, is the evidence clear enough? Do these different fossil finds really belong together under the name Astrodon? It's still kind of an open question, it sounds like.
It is. Without complete skeletons, these debates are tricky. But that's science always questioning, always looking for better evidence.
Okay, but despite all that taxonomic back and forth, we do have a general idea of what Astrodon was like physically, right? A sauropod, big, long neck, plant eater. How big are we talking?
Oh yeah, it was big. Definitely a large sauropod. Estimates put it at maybe 20 meters long. That's about 66 feet.
66 feet.
Yeah, and maybe 9 meters or 30 feet tall. Weight-wise, probably around 20 metric tons.
20 tons. That's like, what, 3 or 4 large elephants?
Something like that. A massive animal.
Incredible. And the sources mention a life restoration. Does that give us a good visual? What do scientists think it looked like?
Well, the restorations are based on the fossils we have, plus what we know about related dinosaurs, the Titanosauriforms, which is the group Astrodon likely belongs to. So you picture that classic sauropod shape. Huge body, 4 thick legs, long neck, long tail, herbivore.
Got it. Now let's place this giant. When and where did it live? We know early Cretaceous, Maryland.
Right, early Cretaceous. The Arundel Formation in Maryland, specifically, is dated to the Albian stage. That's based on fossil pollen and spores, paleonomorphs. Puts it around 112 to 110 million years ago.
A long, long time ago. And not just Maryland, right? You mentioned other places.
Correct. Fossils that look like Astrodon, especially the teeth, have also turned up in the Antlers Formation. That spreads across parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas.
Okay, the Antlers Formation, same time period.
Pretty much, yeah. Also considered Albian, roughly 110 million years ago.
Yeah.
They figure that out by comparing the fossils there to other dated sites, like the Trinity Group in Texas. And interestingly, there are even some finds in Portugal, the Papo Seco Formation, that seem similar. Suggests this type of sauropod might have been quite widespread.
Wow, Maryland, Oklahoma, maybe even Portugal. Quite the range. So what were these places like back then? Let's talk paleo environment. Maryland first.
Okay, the Arundel Formation environment, where Astrodon was first found. The thinking is it was probably a wide, fairly flat plain, lots of streams, rivers crossing it, maybe something like the Gulf Coast region of the U.S. today, but, 110 million years ago.
And who else lived there? Who were Astrodon's neighbors in ancient Maryland?
It was a busy place, it seems. Besides Astrodon, you had other dinosaurs, some smaller meat-eaters, coelurosaurs, armored dinosaurs like the Ankylosaurian Brachionodon and the nodosaurid Propanpalosaurus.
Armored tanks walking around.
Yeah. Maybe an early type of horned dinosaur, a basal ceratopsian, and possibly the ornithopod Tenontosaurus as well.
Okay, a whole community. Any big predators to worry about, besides the little ones?
Definitely. There were several theropods. Some names aren't super well known, like Dryptosaurus medius, Capylosaurus potens, but the top dog, the apex predator, was almost certainly Acrocanthosaurus atticensis.
Acrocanthosaurus. A fearsome name. Must have kept Astrodon on its toes, big as it was.
You'd think so. And it wasn't just dinosaurs. The Arundel Formation fossils also show freshwater sharks, lungfish, several kinds of turtles like glyptops.
Turtles too?
Yep, and croc relatives like Goniopholis. Even an early mammal, Argillimus marylandensis. We also find trace fossils footprints, big theropod tracks called eubrontes, and pterosaur tracks too, pterocynus.
Flying reptiles overhead. And what about the plants? What was Astrodon eating?
The plant life included trees, we know that from silicified wood, cycads like dianites, ginkgo trees, low-growing stuff like selaginella, and big conifers like giant redwoods, sequoia. Plenty for a large herbivore.
A rich ecosystem indeed. Now shift over to Oklahoma, the antlers formation environment, similar scene.
Similar in that it was diverse. Astrodon, or its close relatives, shared that space with another giant sauropod, Sauroposeidon protellus.
Two giants.
Yeah. Plus the Dromaeosaur Deinonychus. You know, the raptor with the big claw.
Definitely no Deinonychus. Fast and smart.
And just like in Maryland, Acrocanthosaurus was there too, the big carnosaur.
So Acrocanthosaurus was widespread, a major player across North America back then.
Seems that way. Interestingly, the most common dinosaur found in the antlers formation fossils is actually Tenontosaurus, the ornithopod.
Okay, lots of them around.
Yeah. Other animals included amphibians like Alvin or Patan, various reptiles, another croc relative, Bernasartia, fish like Goniopholis, more turtles, glyptops, Niomacales, even possible bird fossils, though not definitive. The most common vertebrate overall seems to have been the garfish, Lepus osteus, and early mammals too, like Tocotherium and Parasimexomys.
Fascinating. Two distinct, thriving ecosystems where Astrodon lived. Okay, let's circle back to the beginning, that quirky cultural thing, Maryland and Texas.
Right. So Astrodon johnstonii finally became Maryland's official state dinosaur in 1998. Took a while, but it got there.
About time, since it was found there.
Exactly. But as you mentioned, for a while, Astrodon was actually the state dinosaur of Texas.
How did that happen again?
It likely ties back to that whole Pleuroculus debate. Early sauropod finds in Texas were named Pleuroculus. And since, for a time, some scientists thought Pleuroculus was the same as Astrodon.
Ah, Texas claimed Astrodon based on fossils that were called Pleuroculus, but thought to be Astrodon.
That seems to be the most plausible explanation. It shows how scientific debates can ripple out into things like state symbols. Texas later switched its state dinosaur to Sauroposeidon.
Okay, that makes more sense now. A case of paleontological connections, even tangled ones, influencing state pride. And Astrodon pops up in museums, too.
Oh, yeah. There's a great life-size model at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Apparently, it even has a detail showing a healed wound on its leg.
Wow, a little glimpse into its life struggles.
Right. And there's another big model at the Maryland Science Center in Baltimore. Helps people really grasp the scale of these animals. Museums bringing them to life.
That's fantastic. Really important for connecting people to this ancient past. Okay, so let's wrap this up. What are the key things we should take away about Astrodon?
Well, I think the main things are Astrodon was a major sauropod, a big plant eater from the early Cretaceous of North America. Its discovery in Maryland was significant, really early in American paleontology.
Right.
The whole debate about its connection to pleuroculus is fascinating because it shows you how science works. The arguments, the revisions, dealing with incomplete evidence.
Yeah, that uncertainty is part of the process.
It is. And despite the questions, we know it was huge, and we have a pretty good picture of the worlds it lived in, both in Maryland and Oklahoma, rich, diverse ecosystems.
So hopefully for you listening, this gives you a solid feel for Astrodon, the star-toothed giant, its discovery, the scientific detective work, and its ancient world, all without getting too bogged down.
But maybe it leaves you with something to think about. As we find more fossils, maybe better ones, how will our picture of Astrodon change? Could we finally settle that Pleuroculus question? Will new discoveries confirm what Carpenter and Tidwell thought? Or maybe swing things back towards what Rose and Dieppe suggested? Or something else entirely? What puzzle piece might turn up next to finally reveal the true identity of this star-toothed dinosaur?